The coffee was still warm when the first alien ships appeared in Earth's sky. Emma looked up from her morning newspaper, watching the massive dark shapes block out the sun over downtown Portland. Her neighbor Bob was watering his roses next door, completely unbothered by the sight of 100 warships hanging in the atmosphere like storm clouds. "Morning, Emma," Bob called over the fence. "Looks like we got company." Admiral Theck studied the blue planet through the viewing screen of his flagship. 50 years had passed since the Krillian Empire last came to this world. 50 years since these humans had somehow defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy. But that was then. Now the Krillians had learned. They had studied. They had prepared. The Empire had watched from distant stars as humanity spread across space. Their colonies reached dozens of worlds. Their ships traveled farther each year. Surely their homeworld was now defenseless, protected only by old weapons and weak civilians. "Sir, we are detecting no military satellites," reported his tactical officer. "No defense platforms. No fleet presence." Thex nodded with satisfaction. "Just as we expected. They have grown soft and spread themselves too thin. Begin the invasion." Down. In New Geneva, Lisa Park was teaching her third-grade class about butterfly life cycles when the shadow fell across their classroom windows. The children pressed their faces to the glass, watching sleek landing pods streak toward the playground, like falling stars. "Mrs. Park, are those the visitors?" asked little Tim, not sounding scared at all. "I believe so, dear," Lisa replied, closing her lesson book. "Well, I suppose we should go greet them. Class, remember your manners." The landing pods hit the ground with thunderous crashes, scorching the grass and cracking the concrete. Steam hissed from their sides as massive doors opened. The first Krillian soldiers emerged, 8 feet tall and covered in battle armor that had conquered 20 worlds. Their weapons could melt steel. Their shields could stop tank rounds. But the playground wasn't empty as expected. A small crowd had gathered. An old man with a walking stick stood near the swings. A woman in a gardening apron held a watering can. Several teenagers sat on the jungle gym, looking curious but not frightened. Commander Vorth stepped forward, his voice booming through his helmet speakers. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender immediately or face destruction." The old man with the walking stick shuffled closer. "I'm sorry, son, but I don't think I heard you right. Could you speak up a bit? These old ears aren't what they used to be." Vorth raised his plasma rifle. "I said surrender. We are the Krillian Empire. We have conquered dozens of species." "Oh, the Krillians." The old man smiled. "My name's Frank, by the way. Frank Peterson. I used to work at the post office before I retired. Are you boys lost? This is Earth, third planet from the sun. Maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere?" Around the landing zone, more Krillian troops were having similar conversations. In Tokyo, a businessman in a suit calmly asked alien invaders if they had proper entry visas. In Lagos, a street vendor offered confused soldiers some fresh fruit while explaining local customs. Admiral Thex received the first reports with growing irritation. "What do you mean they're not afraid? We are invading their planet." "Sir, they seem to think we're tourists," Commander Vorth replied through the comm. One of them asked if we needed directions to the nearest hotel. "Then show them our power, fire warning shots, destroy some buildings." But when the Krillian weapons fired, something strange happened. The energy blasts curved away from their targets, harmlessly striking empty patches of dirt. The humans watched this with mild interest, as if observing a street performance. Frank Peterson tapped his walking stick on the ground. "That's quite a light show, boys, very pretty colors, but you're scorching Mrs. Henderson's roses, and she's very proud of those. Maybe aim somewhere else?" Commander Vorth checked his weapon. The targeting system showed perfect accuracy, but somehow every shot missed. "This is impossible," he muttered. More reports came in from around the globe. Krillian forces were landing, successfully, but nothing was going according to plan. The humans weren't running or hiding. They weren't calling for help or begging for mercy. They were treating the invasion like a neighborhood barbecue where unexpected guests had shown up. In Moscow, A grandmother offered tea and cookies to bewildered alien soldiers. In Sydney, a group of surfers invited confused invaders to watch them catch waves. In Cairo, a tour guide started explaining local history to a platoon that had come to conquer the city. Emma finished her coffee and walked outside to meet the aliens who had landed in her backyard. 3 Krillian warriors stood among her tomato plants, looking lost and frustrated. "Sorry about the mess," she said, pointing to the scorched earth where their pod had landed. "But don't worry about it, the grass will grow back. Can I get you anything? Water, sandwiches, you all look tired from your long trip." The lead warrior raised his weapon threateningly. "We are here to conquer your world." "That's nice, dear," Emma replied, the same tone she used with her grandchildren when they announced they were going to be astronauts or dragons. "But conquest is such hard work. Why don't you rest first? I was just about to make lunch." Across the planet, similar scenes played out. The mighty Krillian war machine, designed to crush resistance and break spirits, found itself utterly confused by humanity's complete lack of proper fear. These people acted like invasion was just another Tuesday morning, slightly more interesting than usual, but nothing to get excited about. Admiral Thex stared at the reports flooding his command center. No casualties on either side. No destruction of strategic targets, no signs of panic or surrender. Just humans being inexplicably, impossibly calm. He began to wonder if perhaps the Empire had made a terrible mistake in returning to Earth. But it was too late now. The invasion had begun, and whatever these humans were planning, the Krillians would have to see it through to the end. The smell of fresh bread drifted across the battlefield where no battle was taking place. Maria Santos had been running her bakery for 30 years, and today was no different except for the 8-foot-tall armored aliens standing in her shop, looking confused and hungry. "What can I get for you boys?" she asked, wiping flour from her hands. The cinnamon rolls just came out of the oven. Commander Crix tried to maintain his threatening posture, but the warm smell was making his stomach growl inside his helmet. "We are not here for food. We are here to establish control of this sector." "Well, you can't work on an empty stomach," Maria replied, wrapping up a dozen pastries. "Here, take these. No charge for first-time customers." 20 miles away, Professor David Kim was having an equally strange morning. The university campus where he taught physics had become a landing zone for Krillian dropships. Students sat on the grass nearby, some taking notes, others recording videos with their phones. "Fascinating," Professor Kim murmured, examining the alien technology with genuine curiosity. "The energy distribution in your landing thrusters is remarkably efficient. How do you manage the heat dissipation?" The Krillian tech officer couldn't help himself. "We use a triple-phase cooling system with liquid nitrogen backup." "Brilliant. I've been working on similar problems in my lab. Would you mind if I took some readings? I promise not to interfere with your conquest schedule." Admiral Thex watched the situation reports with growing alarm. His forces had established footholds across Earth's major cities, but instead of controlling anything, they seemed to be making friends. Worse, the humans were asking questions that his soldiers were actually answering. "Sir, the 3rd Battalion reports they've been invited to a school assembly," his communications officer announced. "The children want to learn about alien culture." "What about the 4th Regiment? They're helping an elderly human fix his roof. Apparently their landing pod damaged some tiles, and they felt bad about it." Thex rubbed his temples where a massive headache was forming. This wasn't how invasions were supposed to work. In downtown Seattle, things were getting even stranger. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a marine biologist, had struck up a conversation with a group of Krillian soldiers about their homeworld's ocean life. Before anyone quite understood how it happened, she was giving them an impromptu lecture on Earth's whale migration patterns. "The beauty of it is in the complexity," she explained, drawing diagrams in the sand with a stick. "Each pod has its own communication methods, passed down through generations. It's not unlike how I imagine your military units maintain cultural identity across different worlds." The alien soldiers found themselves nodding along. One of them, Sergeant Bricks, mentioned that his homeworld had similar creatures, and soon the conversation had shifted to comparative xenobiology. Dr. Walsh took careful notes, thrilled to learn about life on other planets. Meanwhile, in the financial district of New York, something unprecedented was happening. The Krillian economic warfare specialist, Sub-Commander Nix, had landed expecting to disrupt Earth's banking systems and cause financial panic. Instead, he found himself in a heated discussion with a group of day traders about currency exchange rates across the galaxy. See, the problem with conquest-based economics, explained trader Rick Thompson, is that it's not sustainable long-term. You're basically strip-mining civilizations. But if you established trade partnerships instead, you'd have steady income streams for centuries. Sub-Commander Nix found himself taking notes. These humans raised some interesting points about resource management that his superiors had never considered. The pattern was repeating everywhere. In London, Krillian soldiers were learning about human art from museum guides. In Tokyo, they were being taught origami by school children. In Mumbai, they were getting cooking lessons from street food vendors who insisted that anybody, even alien invaders, needed to eat properly. Emma had invited her alien visitors inside for lunch. The 3 Krillian warriors sat awkwardly at her kitchen table, their armor scraping against her chairs. She'd made sandwiches and soup, chatting about her garden while they ate. The trick with tomatoes, she was saying, is giving them just enough stress. Too much water and they get lazy. Too little and they give up entirely. It's all about balance. The lead warrior, who had introduced himself as Captain Door, found himself genuinely interested. On our world, we use hydroponics for most food production, but your methods seem more natural. Everything needs the right environment to thrive, Emma agreed. Even warriors, I imagine. It must be hard being so far from home. Captain Dore set down his sandwich. No one had ever asked him about being homesick before. It is difficult, he admitted. We have been traveling for many months to reach this world. Back at Krillian Command, Admiral Thex was receiving reports that made no sense. His invasion force was spread across the planet, but instead of establishing control, they were attending cooking classes, helping with community projects, and having philosophical discussions about the nature of civilization. "Sir, we have a problem," announced his tactical officer. "The humans aren't resisting us." "That's good, isn't it?" "No, sir. They're not resisting because they don't see us as a threat. They think we're exchange students." Thex stared at the tactical display showing his forces scattered across Earth's surface. Every unit was marked green for secure, but somehow he felt less in control than when the invasion began. The humans were doing something to his soldiers, changing them in ways he couldn't understand. In Portland, Bob finished watering his roses and walked over to chat with the Krillian guards who had been stationed in his neighborhood. "You boys, been standing out here all morning," he observed. "Must be thirsty work. I've got some iced tea in the fridge if you want some." The guards looked at each other uncertainly. Their orders were to maintain perimeter security and watch for hostile activity. But the only activity they'd observed was Bob tending his garden and Mrs. Johnson walking her dog. It had been remarkably peaceful. "Iced tea would be acceptable," the senior guard finally replied. As Bob headed inside to get drinks, one of the younger guards wondered aloud, "Is this what conquest is supposed to feel like?" His partner shrugged. "I don't know. This is my first invasion." Neither of them noticed the small device Bob had casually dropped near their position, or the way it quietly scanned their weapons and armor before dissolving harmlessly into the soil. Earth's defensive systems were working perfectly, but they operated on principles the Krillian Empire had never encountered. The humans weren't fighting back because they didn't need to. They were doing something far more dangerous to an invasion force. They were being genuinely irresistibly kind. The tennis ball bounced twice before 12-year-old Amy caught it with one hand, while simultaneously solving a calculus problem on her tablet with the other. Her math tutor, Mrs. Peterson, nodded approvingly as several Krillian soldiers watched from behind the school fence, utterly bewildered by what they were seeing. "Good work, Amy," Mrs. Peterson said. "Now, can you explain to our guests how you calculated the trajectory while accounting for wind resistance and gravitational variance?" Amy looked up at the alien soldiers with bright, curious eyes. "It's just basic physics," she said cheerfully. You measure the environmental factors, apply the standard equations, and adjust for personal reaction time. Everyone learns this in elementary school. The Krillian soldiers exchanged worried glances. Their species' greatest military scientists needed complex computers to make such calculations, yet this human child was doing it in her head while playing with a ball. Admiral Thex had finally decided to escalate. If kindness and confusion were the humans' weapons, then overwhelming force would be his answer. "Deploy the war mechs," he ordered. "If they won't surrender to soldiers, perhaps giant robots will change their minds." The massive machines dropped from orbit like falling meteors. Each one stood 50 feet tall, armed with plasma cannons that could level city blocks. Their armor could withstand nuclear strikes. Their sensors could track a single target from miles away. They were the pinnacle of Krillian military engineering. The first mech landed in Central Park, its weight shaking the ground and toppling several trees. Citizens scattered, but not in the panicked way Thex expected. Instead, they moved with calm efficiency, like people stepping aside for a parade. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been feeding ducks by the pond, walked over to examine the giant robot. "Interesting," she murmured, pulling out her phone to take pictures. "The articulation points are remarkably sophisticated, but isn't this design a bit unstable? The center of gravity seems off." The mech's pilot, veteran Commander Grix, activated the external speakers. "Human, you will evacuate this area immediately." "Oh, I'm not in your way," Dr. Chen replied. "I'm just admiring the engineering. I work in robotics myself. Nothing this big, but the principles are similar. Tell me, how do you prevent feedback loops in the neural interface? That's always been a problem with our larger models." Commander Grix blinked inside his cockpit. "Neural interface? How did you know about that?" "Well, it's obvious from the response. Patterns," Dr. Chen said, as if explaining something to a slow student. "Direct thought control is the only way to manage something this complex in real time. But the lag between intention and action must be significant. Have you considered quantum processing to reduce the delay?" Before Grix could answer, his mech suddenly stopped responding to his commands. The massive robot stood frozen, its systems completely locked up. "What's happening?" he demanded. "Oh, sorry about that," came a voice from below. A teenager on a skateboard had rolled up to the mech's foot and was connecting some kind of device to an access panel. "I just need to run a quick diagnostic. This'll only take a minute." "That's impossible. Our systems are protected by military-grade encryption." The teenager, who looked no older than 16, glanced up with a confused expression. "Encryption? This is just basic quantum crypto. We learned this stuff in middle school. Your security protocols are kind of old-fashioned, aren't they?" Across the city, similar scenes were playing out. Every war mech had been quietly disabled by humans who treated the advanced alien technology like broken appliances that needed fixing. In Times Square, an elderly woman with a knitting bag had somehow rewired a mech's targeting system. In Brooklyn, a group of college students were giving a detailed critique of another mech's structural design, while its pilot sat helplessly inside. Admiral Thex stared at the reports in disbelief. "How are they doing this? Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs." His science officer looked up from her console, confusion written across her features. "Sir, I've been analyzing their capabilities. According to our intelligence, humans discovered radio waves only 200 of their years ago, but they're manipulating quantum fields like they've been doing it for millennia." The truth was beginning to dawn on Emma as she watched her neighbor's grandson, little Tony, casually reprogram a Krillian weapon using some kind of handheld device he'd apparently built himself. "Tony, sweetheart," she called out. "What exactly are they teaching you in school these days?" "Oh, you know, the usual stuff," Tony replied, not looking up from his work. "Math, history, literature, basic engineering, quantum mechanics, xenobiology, tactical analysis, diplomatic protocol, advanced chemistry, stellar cartography, and introduction to temporal physics. Plus, we're starting philosophical ethics next semester." Emma nearly dropped her coffee cup. "And you consider that usual?" "Well, yeah," Tony said, looking puzzled. "How else would we be ready for the universe? Grandma always said education is important." Captain Dorr, who had been having lunch with Emma regularly for the past week, suddenly understood something that chilled him to his core. "Emma, what age? Do your children start learning these subjects?" "Oh, around 5 or 6, Emma replied casually. "Though some of the brighter ones start reading quantum theory by age 4. Kids these days are so advanced." The Krillian officer felt his worldview crumbling. On his planet, such knowledge was restricted to elite specialists who trained for decades. Here, it was elementary education. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was still giving her impromptu lecture series to fascinated Krillian soldiers, but now she was explaining something that made them deeply uncomfortable. "The thing about human development," she was saying, "is that we've always been adaptable. But after we learned we weren't alone in the universe, we decided our children needed to be ready for anything." "What do you mean, ready for anything?" asked Sergeant Bricks. "Well, space travel, alien contact, unknown technologies, hostile environments, diplomatic challenges, military threats, scientific puzzles, social complexity, and basically any situation that might arise in a galaxy full of surprises. So we redesigned our education system accordingly." The alien soldier stared at her. "You redesigned your entire species' education for scenarios that hadn't happened yet?" "Of course," Dr. Walsh said, as if this were obvious. "What else would responsible parents do?" Back at Central Park, Dr. Chen had finished her analysis of the disabled war mech. "The good news," she announced to Commander Grix, "is that your targeting system is now much more accurate. The bad news is that it will only target uninhabited areas or practice ranges. We can't have weapons that might hurt people, you understand?" "You modified our weapons without permission." "Oh, we don't really do the permission thing anymore," Dr. Chen explained. "If we see a problem, we fix it. It's more efficient that way." The teenager with the skateboard looked up from his work. "Plus, we sent a message to your fleet explaining the modifications. Your admiral should have received our technical documentation by now, along with some suggestions for improving your ship designs. Some of those energy distribution patterns are really inefficient." Admiral Thex stared at the data package that had somehow appeared in his ship's computers despite all security protocols. The humans had not only disabled his ground forces, but they'd analyzed his entire fleet and offered helpful suggestions for improvement. The technical modifications were brilliant, the tactical assessments were accurate, and the tone was unfailingly polite. He was beginning to realize that humanity hadn't grown soft in 50 years. They had grown into something far more dangerous than any warrior race could ever be. They had become a species where every individual possessed the knowledge and capabilities that other civilizations reserved for their greatest experts. And they were sharing that knowledge freely, as if universal education and impossible competence were just normal parts of daily life. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the deepest secure chamber of their headquarters station. Admiral Thex found himself facing representatives from dozens of species, all of whom looked deeply uncomfortable when he mentioned humanity. "You told us Earth was monitored," Thex accused. "You said they were contained and manageable. You never said their entire population consisted of strategic geniuses who treat advanced physics like children's games." Council Speaker Vorthak, a dignified member of the ancient Melody race, shifted nervously. "Admiral, we tried to warn your empire. The diplomatic messages clearly stated that humanity required careful handling." "Careful handling? They've turned my invasion force into graduate students. Half my soldiers are attending human universities now, and the other half are helping with community service projects." The Altarian representative leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's dim light. "Admiral, the Council has spent considerable resources ensuring that humanity remains focused on exploration and knowledge gathering rather than conquest. They are not contained because they are weak. They are contained because they choose to contain themselves." Thex felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" The truth came out in fragments, each revelation more disturbing than the last. Earth's solar system wasn't undefended because humanity was peaceful. It was undefended because anything capable of threatening Earth was automatically neutralized long before it became a problem. The seemingly empty space around Earth contained monitoring systems that could track every ship within 50 light-years, and defensive technologies that made traditional warfare obsolete. But we detected no military installations, Thex protested. Because every human is a military installation, explained Counselor Zephyrin of the Thrakari Union. Their entire educational system is designed to produce citizens who can independently handle any crisis, solve any problem, and adapt to any threat. What you encountered wasn't their military, it was their civilian population having a slow Tuesday. The melody speaker activated a holographic display showing Earth's expansion into space. Observe their colonies, Admiral. Each settlement represents humanity adapting to environments that would kill other species. They don't terraform worlds to suit themselves. They change themselves to suit the worlds. The images were disturbing. Human settlements in the crushing gravity of super-Earth planets, where the colonists had somehow adapted to function normally, despite forces that should have flattened them. Communities thriving in the radiation-soaked systems near Galactic Center, where their children played in energy fields that would sterilize most forms of life. Deep space habitats where families lived in hard vacuum, breathing methane atmospheres, or existing in temperature ranges that approached absolute zero. This is impossible, Thex whispered. Biology doesn't work this way. Human biology apparently does, the Altarian replied. They don't see limitations as permanent features of reality. They see them as temporary inconveniences to be overcome, through education, adaptation, and what they call applied creativity. Back on Earth, Frank Peterson was having tea with Admiral Thex's personal guard in his garden. The elderly human had become something of a grandfather figure to the confused alien soldiers, offering advice and stories while they tried to understand their situation. The thing about humans, Frank was saying, is that we worry about our children. Always have. When I was young, we worried about wars and diseases and natural disasters. But then we learned about space and aliens and all the wonderful and terrible things that might be out there. He poured more tea for his guests. So we decided our kids should be ready for anything. Not just ready to survive, but ready to thrive. Every generation has been a little bit more capable than the last, and they've been building on that foundation for decades now. One of the guards, a young soldier named Trix, asked the question that had been bothering him. Mr. Peterson, what happened to your planet's military? Where are your soldiers? Frank chuckled. Oh, they're out there among the stars dealing with real threats. Hostile alien empires, rogue AI civilizations, cosmic phenomena that could end entire species. The serious stuff that requires professional attention. But what about your planet's defense? Well, you're looking at it, Frank said, gesturing to his neighborhood. Every person on Earth received the same education, the same training, the same preparation for whatever the universe might throw at us. We're all capable of handling routine problems like invasions or diplomatic incidents. The implications hit Trix like a physical blow. Routine problems? You consider military conquest routine? Compared to some of the things our children face, out in deep space? Yes, I'd say conquest is fairly straightforward. It's just a matter of technology and tactics with some psychology thrown in. Nothing that can't be handled with proper preparation and good manners. Meanwhile, the real scope of humanity's capabilities was becoming clear to Admiral Thex through Council records. Human exploration fleets didn't just visit other worlds. They visited other dimensions, parallel realities, and temporal zones where causality worked differently. Their scientists didn't just study physics. They developed new forms of physics when the old ones proved inadequate for their needs. Show me their military capabilities, Thex demanded. The council members exchanged worried glances. Admiral, we can't, admitted the melody speaker. Every time we try to assess humanity's true military potential, they politely ask us not to. And when humanity asks for something politely, it's generally wise to comply. What does that mean? It means, said Counselor Zephyrin quietly, that the last species who ignored humanity's polite requests ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not conquered. They simply stopped existing, as if they had never been born. We're still not sure how humans accomplished that, and we're too afraid to ask. The session was interrupted by an alert from the Council's monitoring systems. The Krillian invasion fleet was powering down their weapons and preparing to depart Earth orbit. But they weren't fleeing in defeat. According to the communications intercepts, they were accepting invitations to extend their stay for cultural exchange programs. Admiral Thex received a message from his own command staff. His officers reported that Earth's humans had offered to upgrade their ships, improve their military tactics, and provide advanced technological assistance. The humans had also extended invitations for Krillian families to visit Earth, learn from human schools, and participate in what they called cultural enrichment opportunities. "Sir," his communications officer added, "they've also offered to help us establish better relationships with our neighboring species. Apparently, conquest-based expansion is considered inefficient and psychologically unhealthy. They have suggested alternative approaches that they claim will improve our long-term stability and happiness." Thex realized that humanity hadn't defeated his invasion, they had adopted it. His soldiers weren't prisoners or casualties. They were exchange students in the universe's most advanced civilization, receiving educations that would make them more capable than the greatest leaders of his own species. The Krillian Empire had come to conquer Earth. Instead, Earth was conquering them, one mind at a time, through the simple act of sharing knowledge and treating everyone like welcome guests who just needed a little guidance to reach their potential. And the terrifying part was that the humans seemed to genuinely believe this was normal behavior for civilized people. The farewell celebration filled 3 city blocks in downtown Geneva, where humans and Krillians shared food, stories, and demonstrations of impossible technologies that had somehow become routine for everyday people. Children from both species played together in the streets while their parents exchanged cultural knowledge and laughed about the misunderstandings that had brought them together. Admiral Thex stood on a platform overlooking the festival, no longer wearing his battle armor, but simple civilian clothes that Emma had helped him pick out during a shopping trip that had somehow become part of his education about human society. Beside him, Frank Peterson offered commentary on the various activities below. "That group over there is learning about Krillian poetry," Frank explained, pointing to a circle where his neighbors sat with alien visitors, all of them working with translation devices. "And those folks are teaching your people how to grow vegetables in low-gravity environments. Always useful skills to have." Thex watched his former invasion force scattered throughout the celebration. Commander Vorth was helping a group of teenagers set up some kind of science experiment. Captain Dorr had become fascinated with human cooking and was trading recipes with several local chefs. Sergeant Brix was playing a complex strategy game with children who were casually explaining mathematical concepts that exceeded his military academy training. "Frank," Thex said quietly, "what have you done to my soldiers?" The elderly human considered the question seriously. "We educated them. Same thing we do with our own children, really. Show them how things work. Teach them to think for themselves, help them understand that the universe is full of wonderful possibilities if you approach it with curiosity instead of fear." "But they were trained warriors." "They still are," Frank replied. "They're just better at it now. Your Commander Vorth asked me yesterday about conflict resolution theory, and we had a fascinating discussion about alternatives to traditional warfare. Bright young man. He'll make an excellent diplomat when he gets back to your people." The truth was sinking in for Admiral Thex. The humans hadn't defeated his invasion through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had done something far more profound and terrifying. They had improved his people, enhanced their capabilities, and expanded their understanding of what was possible in the universe. Dr. Jennifer Walsh approached the platform, accompanied by several Krillian science officers who were taking detailed notes while she spoke. "Admiral," she called out, "we've been discussing interspecies collaboration on some deep space research projects. Your people have remarkable insights into quantum mechanics, and we think there's potential for some fascinating joint ventures." "What kind of joint ventures?" "Oh, exploring temporal anomalies, investigating the nature of dark matter, maybe mapping some of the parallel dimensions we've been curious about. Nothing too ambitious for a first collaboration, but it could lead to interesting discoveries." One of the Krillian officers, Subcommander Nix, looked up from his notes. "Dr. Walsh has been explaining how human science works. Admiral, they don't just study phenomena. They participate in phenomena. Their children play games that involve manipulating space-time for entertainment. To demonstrate, a nearby group of 8-year-olds had set up what appeared to be a small, gravity well in the middle of the street, where they were playing a version of catch that involved throwing balls through folded space. Parents watched approvingly while offering suggestions for improving their technique. Perfectly safe, Dr. Walsh assured the worried alien officers. The local space-time is well contained, and the children understand the safety protocols. We introduced gravitational manipulation to the elementary curriculum about 20 years ago, very popular with that age group. Admiral Thex felt his worldview reshaping itself around these revelations. Are all human children capable of this? Oh yes, Dr. Walsh replied cheerfully. Along with basic telepathy, molecular restructuring, energy manipulation, and what we call practical omniscience within their areas of interest. It's amazing what young minds can accomplish when you give them proper education and encouragement. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the celebration's main stage. Amy, the 12-year-old who had been doing calculus problems earlier, was preparing to demonstrate something she called applied dimensional engineering for the entertainment of their guests. What followed was a presentation that redefined Admiral Thex's understanding of what was scientifically possible. The child casually opened what appeared to be a doorway to another location entirely, stepped through it, and emerged from a second doorway 50 feet away, all while explaining the mathematical principles involved in a way that made it sound like elementary geometry. The key, Amy explained to her fascinated audience, is understanding that distance is really just a matter of perspective. If you approach it correctly, any 2 points in space are actually the same point, just viewed from different angles. The Krillian soldiers applauded politely, though most of them looked like their minds were struggling to process what they had witnessed. Their own greatest scientists would have considered such technology impossible, yet this human child was treating it as a school project. Frank Peterson climbed onto the stage to make an announcement. Before our friends from the Krillian Empire returned to their homes, we wanted to share something special with them. A message from our children who are currently exploring the galaxy. The holographic display that materialized above the crowd showed scenes from human colonies across dozens of star systems. But these weren't the struggling outposts that Admiral Thex had imagined. These were thriving civilizations that had adapted to environments no other species could survive. On a world orbiting a neutron star, human children played in gravitational fields that should have torn them apart. In the radiation-soaked core, systems families had picnics while casually manipulating high-energy particles for entertainment. Near the galactic edge, colonists lived in complete darkness, their children having developed senses that could perceive reality through quantum fluctuations. "Hi, Earth," called out a cheerful voice from the display. The speaker appeared to be a teenage girl floating in what looked like open space, but she was breathing normally and seemed perfectly comfortable in the hard vacuum. "We're having a great time out here at the Magellanic Research Station. We've made friends with some really interesting energy beings, and they're teaching us how to exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously." More messages followed. A boy who couldn't have been older than 10 was explaining his work studying temporal mechanics near a black hole, where time moved so slowly that seconds on his world equaled years in normal space. A group of siblings had established contact with machine intelligences in the galactic core and were collaborating on projects involving the fundamental structure of reality itself. "The important thing to remember," said another young voice from a colony ship traveling between galaxies, "is that the universe is really big and full of amazing things to learn about. We're having so much fun discovering new forms of physics and making friends with civilizations that exist in ways we never imagined possible." Admiral Thex stared at the display in growing horror and fascination. "These are your children?" "Some of them," Emma replied proudly. "My grandson Peter is the one studying temporal mechanics. Very bright boy. Always was curious about how time works. But they're living in conditions that should be impossible for biological life." "Well, yes, with old-fashioned biology," Dr. Walsh agreed. "But humans have always been adaptable. When our children encounter environments that challenge the limits of normal human capability, they simply expand those limits. It's what children do naturally when you give them proper education and encouragement." The display showed more scenes of impossible human achievements. Cities built inside stars, where residents had learned to exist as organized energy patterns. Colonies in parallel dimensions where the laws of physics worked differently, and human children had adapted accordingly. Research stations in the spaces between realities where families studied the fundamental nature of existence itself. The real message we wanted to share, Frank continued, is that we're always happy to welcome new friends into our extended family. Your empire has such potential, such curiosity about the universe. We'd love to help you explore that potential. Sub-Commander Nix raised a trembling hand. What exactly are you offering? Education, replied Amy, the 12-year-old dimension manipulator. Same thing we give everyone. We'll teach your people everything we know, help them develop their capabilities, and support them as they discover what they're truly capable of achieving. And in return? Nothing, Frank said with a smile. Well, except maybe you could help us with some of the bigger projects our children are working on. They're trying to figure out how to communicate with the consciousness that seems to exist at the quantum level of reality. And another group is investigating whether it's possible to create entirely new forms of existence. Always nice to have more perspectives on challenging problems. The celebration continued late into the evening, with humans and Krillians sharing knowledge, stories, and dreams about the future. Admiral Thex found himself in deep conversation with ordinary citizens who casually discussed concepts that exceeded anything in his empire's most advanced scientific databases. As the Krillian fleet prepared to depart, laden with gifts, educational materials, and invitations to return, Admiral Thex finally understood what had happened. His empire had come to conquer a primitive world, and instead had encountered the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, one that measured its advancement not in weapons or territory, but in the unlimited potential of educated minds. The humans hadn't defeated his invasion. They had transformed it into the beginning of a friendship that would change both species forever. And they had done it through the simple revolutionary act of treating everyone, even their would-be conquerors, as capable of learning, growing, and becoming better than they had ever imagined possible. Frank Peterson waved goodbye from his garden as the alien ships rose into the sky, carrying their passengers toward a future bright with new possibilities. Safe travels, he called out. And remember, you're always welcome back for Sunday dinner. In the distance, children laughed as they played games that bent the laws of physics, while their parents discussed plans for exploring new galaxies, making contact with impossible forms of life, and teaching the universe itself to dream of greater things. The Krillian Empire had learned why humans were untouchable, not because they were too strong to defeat, but because they were too kind to resist, too curious to ignore, and too generous with their gifts to do anything but love. And in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers, love had proven to be the most powerful force of all.